In 1963, my father bought the American Heritage History of America. The foreword by John F. Kennedy. There is little that is more important for an American citizen to know than the history and traditions of his country. Without such knowledge, he stands uncertain and defenseless before the world, neither knowing where he came from or where he is going. With such knowledge, he is no longer alone, but draws from a strength far greater than his own, from the cumulative experience of the past and a cumulative vision of the future. Knowledge of our history is, first of all, a pleasure for its own sake. The American past is a record of stirring achievement in the face of stubborn difficulty. It is a record filled with figures larger than life, with high drama and hard decision, with valor and with tragedy, with such incidents both poignant and picturesque, and with the excitement and hope involved in the conquest of a wilderness and the settlement of a continent. For the true historian and for the true student of history, history is an end in itself. It fulfills a deep human need for understanding, and the satisfaction it provides requires no further justification. Yet though no further justification is required for the study of history, it would not be correct to say that history serves no further use. That's a satisfaction of the historian. History, after all, is the memory of a nation. Just as memory enables the individual to learn to choose goals and stick to them, to avoid making the same mistake twice, in short, to grow, so history is a means by which a nation establishes its sense of identity and purpose. The future arises out of the past, and a country's history is a statement of the values and hopes which have forged what has gone before, with no forecast what is to come. As a means of knowledge, history becomes a means of judgment. It offers an understanding of both the variety and unity of a nation whose credo is e pluribus unum, out of many, one. It reminds us of the diverse abundance of our people. Now remember, this is 1963, coming from all races in all parts of the world. And our fields and mountain ranges, deserts and great rivers, our green farmlands and 1,000 voices of our cities. No revolution in communication or transportation can destroy the fact that this continent is, as Walt Whitman said, a nation of nations. Yet it also reminds us that in spite of the diversity and ethnic origin, of graphical locale, occupation or social status, of religious creed or political commitment, Americans are united by an ancient encompassing faith in justice, progress, and freedom. Our history thus tests our policy. Our past judges our present. Of all the disciplines, the study and folly and achievements of man is best calculated to foster the critical sense of what is permanent and meaningful amid the mass of superficial and transient questions which make up day-to-day clamor. The history of our nation tells us every action taken against the freedoms of conscience, of expression, against equality before the law and equality of opportunity, against the ordinary men and women of the country, is an action taken against the American tradition. And it tells us that every action taken for a larger freedom and a more equal and spacious society is one step towards the realization of what Herbert Crowley once called the promise of American life. A knowledge of history is more than a means of judgment. It is also a means of sympathy, a means of relating our own experience with the experience of other peoples, lands, struggling for national fulfillment. We may sometimes forget, for example, that the United States began as an underdeveloped nation which seized its independence by carrying out a successful revolution against colonial empire. We may forget that in the first years of the new republic, George Washington laid down the principle of no permanent alliances and enjoined the United States to a course of neutralism in the face of great power conflicts that divided the civilized world. We may forget that in the first stages of our economic development, our national growth was stimulated to a considerable degree by foreign aid. That is investment from abroad, and by public investment and direction on the part of our state and local as well as national government. We may forget that our own progress and economic change was often accompanied by the issue of wildcat paper money, by the repudiation of bonds, by disorder, fraud, and violence. If we recall the facts of our own past, we may better understand the problems and predicaments of contemporary new nations laboring for national development in circumstances far less favorable than our own. And we will, in consequence, become less liable to the national self-righteous, which is both unworthy of our own traditions and a bane of international relations. A knowledge of history is, in addition, a means of strength in times of change and danger. John Dos Passos wrote, just before World War II, when there was a quicksand of fear under men's reasoning, a sense of continuity with generations gone before can stretch like a lifeline across the scary present. Don Passos called his book The Ground We Stand On, and the title concisely defines the role and the past in preparing us for the crisis of the present and the challenge of the future. When Americans fight for individual liberty, they have Thomas Jefferson and James Madison beside them. When they strive for social justice, they strive alongside Andrew Jackson and Franklin Roosevelt. When they work for peace and world community, they work with Woodrow Wilson. When they fight and die in wars to make men free, they fight and die with Abraham Lincoln. Historic continuity with the past, as Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, is not a duty, it is only a necessity. A knowledge of its history, above all, a means of responsibility to the past and responsibility to the future generations, of responsibility to those who came before us and struggled and sacrificed to pass it to us, our precious inheritance of freedom, and the responsibility to those who will come after us, to whom we must pass on that inheritance, with what new strength and substance it is within our power to add. Fellow citizens, Abraham Lincoln said, we cannot escape history. A fiery trial through which we pass will light us down. To add, in honor or dishonor to the latest generation, American history is not something dead and over. It's always alive, always growing, always unfinished. And every American today has his own contribution to make to the great fabric of traditions and hope which binds all Americans, dead and living, and yet to be born in a common faith and a common destiny. John F. Kennedy. Share this with your friends. Sorry for any mistakes, and God bless them.